Hello, my name is Richard Vincent. Currently I'm chair of the Prime Executive Committee, but for most of my life I've been a cardiologist and a medical educationalist, most recently in our local medical school. What I want to do in this brief DVD is to tell you about Prime, a little background to Prime partnerships in international medical education. And that's the clue, really. Partnerships. We work in partnerships across the world. In international medical education with a whole person approach is very much what we're about. And I hope that you'll enjoy a little history and an explanation of what we do. So we began in England, in the southeast corner, in Kent, where we met first to give a series of postgraduate talks to primary care physicians under the title Doctor's Dilemmas. This was in a place called Burswood, and as you will see, well over 10 years ago. And the reason for those postgraduate lectures was to bring not only scientific explanations and updates in medical practice, but also to consider the whole person context in which medicine was being delivered. What we were doing was working towards something that a little later the World Health Organization was going to recognize. In 1998, they published a document which said that until recently, the health professions have largely followed a medical model which seeks to treat patients by focusing on medicines and surgery, but gives less importance to beliefs and to faith in healing and in the physician and in the doctor-patient relationship. They went on to say this reductionist or mechanistic view of patients is no longer satisfactory. Patients and physicians have begun to realize the value of elements such as faith, hope, and compassion in the healing process. Well, how had that faith and compassion become separate from medical care that used to be given to whole people in a whole person manner? Partly this came as the result of the Enlightenment, a divide between things that were judged to be scientific, provable, and those which are more nebulous, perhaps more personal, the humanities, religion, music, literature, and art. Indeed, those latter were thought to be private, maybe spiritual, but certainly personal and having no particular influence in the public domain. And medicine, medical science that grew well, joined that public secular domain. And the focus then became on the physics, the chemistry, the biology of health and disease, and the other aspects of persons rather got left behind. Now, of course, science has produced amazing developments in medical care. Gadgets for diagnosis, amazing instruments for treatment, all have benefited many. But they have left behind a space which is not so well filled, that of dealing with other elements of the person other than just the physical. Indeed, that was reported fairly recently in the UK, in 2008, by a national charitable body, the King's Fund, who monitor health care and report on its progress in our country. That report focused on the experience of people in hospital and how they sensed they were being cared for. Not just a question of the medical science, but more globally, were their needs met in a holistic way. And in summary, they made it clear the need for health professionals and institutions urgently to focus on caring for the person in the patient. Their investigations show that patients most value how they're cared for, how they're looked after. The report supported the view that a patient is a unique person with diverse needs, an individual to be cared for, not a mechanical condition to be treated. It endorsed a whole person model of care, promoting mental, emotional, spiritual, social, and physical healing. In fact, they quoted a previous publication from someone called Dr. Porter, where he said the hospital was no longer primarily denounced as a gateway to death. That's when it used to be able to offer very little treatment. But now, in spite of all its health science, as a soulless, anonymous, wasteful and inefficient medical factory, performing medicine as medicine demanded it, not as the patient needed it. Now that's also led to the way medical education is conducted, and we find that our students, our junior doctors, are taught very much on the biophysical model. So in this pie chart of a person, which has got somatic and psychological, social and spiritual components, then the biggest emphasis is quite clearly on the physical, on those wonderful processes of biology that we understand and can manipulate, but far less on everything else. In Prime, we seek to redress that balance, certainly not ignoring the physical or the benefits that healthcare in that domain produces, but recognising we need the other components as well for the whole person that we treat when we meet a patient. So back to doctors' dilemmas, that vision of holistic whole person medicine, taking good science and also taking a good account of all the rest that people are made of. In some ways, surprisingly, we found that that style of teaching was very well received. And on one occasion, we had several visitors from Romania. Afterwards, they said, "We'd like more of our friends to come to hear this. This is very new." Then we realised that maybe it was more efficient if we went abroad and took a few of our tutors to a larger company of doctors overseas, beginning in Romania, beginning in a place called Oradea. And in that town, the first expedition, if you will, of the Prime team, we met doctors ready to receive this sort of teaching. And from there, it has grown. Prime's activity across the world by networking, by partnership, by reputation, by individual travel, has reached rather far and wide, really rather to our surprise. In 2010, 60 tutors made 45 visits to 15 countries, and they used up a total of 870-odd tutor days. Through that, we reached about 4,000 participants. Doctors, sometimes nurses, medical students, other health professionals, and also senior medical educators, and from time to time, leading politicians, health ministers, those designing healthcare systems. And in 2011, the numbers were very little different. We continued to make visits all over the world. Here are some of them: Albania, Armenia, Australia, and the many more that you can see on this picture. In fact, overall, since we started, we've visited and been engaged with 37 or so countries, and this seems to grow. The further we travel, the more people want us to return. And when we do, our teaching is in all sorts of forms. We hope to engage everybody, not just by lectures, but by small group work, by individual discussion, by role play, inside, outside, in impressive institutions, in very remote and rather rural locations where facilities are pretty bare. But a key feature is that we establish relationships with the people we work with. We want to go very much on an equal partnership with them to take forward the best sort of healthcare that we can think of, which takes account of the whole person. Prime, actually, in doing this, is a pretty small outfit. It has an office located also in the southeast, in Hastings, which was the originating place for the whole exercise. But there we have just 1.5 full-time office staff to support the work that now travels so widely abroad. In the UK overall, we have about 140 tutors, and these help us in presenting and travelling and generating materials which we can also share with others. I'd like to introduce you just to our foundation principles to show you what it is that we're based on and what we count as important. The first is rather long, so let's take it in smaller chunks. We believe that God is the source of all goodness, love and life, and those who promote these things do God's work, whether they acknowledge him or not. We observe that irrespective of upbringing or culture, there's a remarkable degree of agreement about what constitutes a good doctor or a good nurse in terms of their clinical excellence, their human qualities, and their values. Therefore, we work with people of all faiths or of none from a position of mutual respect. What we wish to do is to aim to enable those with whom we work to find the strengths they need to become excellent health professionals. We recognise that human life comprises body, mind and spirit, and that healing is most effective when all three aspects are addressed together. We look to God as the source of love, forgiveness, life and strength to inspire, sustain and nourish all our relationships. And for us, those relationships are very important because when we leave a country after a few days or perhaps a few weeks, we look to our partners in that country to take forward the work that we've shared with them, perhaps leaving materials, perhaps leaving further contacts, perhaps arranging training for those same people either where they are or back in the UK. And finally, we look to the person of Jesus as our model of excellence in the relationship between patient and healer, also student and teacher, and for his personal values in all our conduct. So what is Prime? Well, a rather surprisingly far-travelling group of individuals pleased to share with our partners abroad the things that we've been learning and the things that we count of value in treating patients and treating them well. Our overall vision is to present this perspective of healthcare wherever we can, by teaching and critically also by example. We want to support partners in many localities to adopt and to teach this approach. And we're startled by the enthusiasm that we meet when we go abroad and find such partners who will take this on. We want to help doctors, nurses and students all over the world to practice compassionate healthcare with renewed enthusiasm and skill. I want to improve healthcare in both developed and developing countries by transformational training. Thank you for watching this presentation and thank you for being interested in the work of Prime. We hope that this has shown you a little of where we've come from and where we're going to and what our visions are. We do hope also that you'll be able to use the other DVD presentations that we've been recording for the work in your country. We're delighted that you've taken such an interest and we're certainly very pleased indeed to work with you along the lines that we've talked about. So we wish you well in that and Lord's blessing in using this teaching in many parts of your country.